Hey, Red. We're not gonna get away with this, are we?
Transistor is a thought-provoking, beautiful piece of art about a slowly disintegrating world and your character's place in it. It's also, surprisingly, a tactical game. Here's how it works. Now, the primary idea behind the gameplay is that you're using programs installed in your sword, or transistor in this case, to defeat your enemies. It's not a hack and slash, though. You can plan out your attacks without being rushed, as shown in this tutorial. This keeps the complexity inherent in the system, while cutting out a lot of the twitch-based combat that might turn off less hardcore players. Each program you use takes up a given amount of your turn, determined by the green bar on the top. When you're confident with your selections, you activate it and let her loose. Once you're done with the turn, though, you have to avoid as much damage as you can while your next turn recharges. Hopefully by that point you're in a good position to start your next, but once it's charged you can activate it whenever you like. As you advance through the story, you get more programs to use, new enemies to fight, and the old enemies get upgraded with new abilities as well. In the beginning, you can fumble around a bit and still be successful, but it's a good idea to take the extra minute or so to look through each new program you get as you advance. You'll likely need it. Now, you start out with 2 programs, but near the end, and you'll see this soon, it gets a little ridiculous. In a good way. I'm going to set up a trial, late game loadout with the programs to give an idea of how the system works. So the first one I selected as my primary attack is Crash. It does a stun, it does a minor amount of damage, but it's also really good for combos. And a stun is really useful. The second primary one I'm using is Cull. That's a high damage but not super efficient attack, but it's really good just to knock out a lot of the high health enemies you're going to fight. Void is the next one. That's very, very important, again, because you're going to need a lot of high health enemies later on. It's an armor break. So you break the armor, you break down the defenses with Void, you hit them with a Cull afterwards. It makes that much more damage when you hit it. Now, because Cull is kind of inefficient, we wanted to use Ping, because even though it's a really rapid fire primary attack, its upgrade is that it reduces the turn planning cost, which means it makes it more efficient. And so using Ping on Cull as an upgrade makes that high damage attack more efficient. The last primary attack we're going to have is Load, and that's basically a bomb. And we're also going to use Breach as a passive, and that just gives you normal, regular abilities all the time. And in this case, it's going to make the turn planning more efficient and just better. Spark, we added to Void because that will make the stacking easier. And then we use Jaunt onto the Load because that will make the bombs explode without us having to trigger it. Now, Purge was used on Crash, however, really the main thrust of this is showing how Void and Cull can work together, which is very, very nice. As mentioned before, this game is a beautiful work of art. I want at least a dozen scenes from this game framed on my wall, and I bought the soundtrack immediately after hearing it, something I rarely do. I don't want to ruin the story, but the main thrust is that this futuristic Neo-Paris sort of city is being invaded by a virus called the Process. This isn't a virus that just makes you sick. It's more akin to a computer virus that engulfs everything in its path, and it's up to you and your transistor to stop it. Now, the transistor is not just a tool or a weapon, it's a character, your partner on this journey, and together the two of you are expecting to fight some pretty daunting foes. The nice thing about the entire concept of the Process is that it allows the developers to create customized arenas with very specific foes for each battle, while remaining true to the world that they've created. Scenarios that might otherwise seem ridiculous make sense as you progress, and that ability to change things so drastically in the world kept me moving through each battle in the storyline without getting tired of it. Throughout your travels, you keep picking up more and more of the story through your transistor, and statements which seemed casual at the time suddenly hit you later on with unexpected force. Now, you play Red, a celebrated singer but also a known provocateur caught up in the madness that is the invasion of this city. Red loses her voice at the start, so the vast majority of the narration has to be told through the transistor itself. Red can only express her personality in limited ways, often through optional terminals. If there's a shortcoming to the story, it's that Red's personality is critical to the ending, and you can easily go through the game without knowing any of it. So you should use the optional terminals, is what I'm trying to say. The art style of this game is striking, creating a clear contrast between the vibrant colors of the city with the stark, oppressive monochrome of the process as it advances. This isn't a game that's pretty for its own sake, though it could be forgiven for being just that. See, throughout the game, the beauty that surrounds you makes the encroaching virus all the more tragic. There aren't complex, rendered cutscenes or complex scenes at all, and the precision with which they have to draw your eye to this area or another is critical, but they pull it off. Some games create incredible experiences with a lot of resources. Other games with limited resources sometimes reach too far and fall short, but Transistor is clearly a game that knows its boundaries and expertly works within them. To end it though, I'm going to jump back to gameplay to tell an example of what turned this game from a good game to a great game. I had set up a loadout of programs for most of it, and it worked for hours. It was all targeted attacks and combos, and while I was doing fine, there were more than a few close calls. But since it kept working, I became less and less willing to change it. It had become a security blanket to an extent, and any new programs were only useful if they could upgrade the system I had already decided on. I had a comfort zone, and I wasn't moving away from it. But the way that Transistor kicks you out of that comfort zone is really smart. For me, that was when I ran into 4 cubes called operators that spawn enemies over and over again until you kill them. I got destroyed. Now, when you lose your life, you don't immediately die to respawn back at your checkpoint to try again. Before they do that, the game starts temporarily disabling your primary attacks. At first, it seems like it's making the game easier, it's giving you another shot, which is true to an extent. But when you run into a buzzsaw like I did, this is when the system shone the most. Not only did I fail, but I lost my security blanket. The entire philosophy I'd used to play this game was wiped out, and the game was telling me, that doesn't work, you have to try another path. Most games don't do that, they let you struggle and yell until you get it right. Now I was forced to come to terms with it, and I had to create a completely new loadout from the programs I'd tossed aside earlier. One of those programs was Load. When I came back, I wrecked them all without losing any life. This is the unexpected genius of Transistor at the end of the day. The story is incredible, the ending is great, the gameplay is responsive and complex with replayability, but how it can turn frustration into joy through its mechanics and how it can force you to reevaluate internalized rules was one of the greatest tasks the game has done for me in years. And at the end of the day, I couldn't recommend it more.
Lee's Junction Jan's delivered. Sea Monster fresh from the bay. Flatbread delivery still going strong. Not so bad when it's cold.